Hi, welcome to WMD, that's Woody's Modelling Diary. And today it's another Woody's Wow, that's Woody's Words of Wisdom on ballasting. And you're probably thinking, well, there's no end of videos out there about ballasting and articles on the internet. What do I need to watch this for? Well, hopefully there's one or two little tips which you may not have seen before. And we're going to be ballasting this small section of track here, and hopefully at the end of the video, if you watch it all the way through, you may have picked up one or two hints which may help you ballasting your layout. First things first, normally people ballast their layouts once the track is down and before they do the scenery. I tend to do the scenery first and then ballast the track. No particular reason other than it gives me a chance to ensure that the track is running as it should and there's no problems with it. Nothing worse than doing all the hard work of ballasting your track and then finding that it doesn't run, or the trains don't run properly on it. That's the first thing. I always tend to paint underneath the track a dark colour. That way, if there's any gaps in the ballast, you won't notice so much as if you'd left it in a bright white or something similar to that. One of the things which I do tend to do is to make sure that the track is flat and firmly attached to the baseboard. And there's nothing worse than having ballasted your track and then finding you've got a lump in it because ballast has got underneath a loose piece of track, because the only way you'll ever deal with that, and I know from experience, is to actually end up taking the track up, and at best you'll end up spending hours cleaning the track of ballast till you reuse it. At worst it will end up in the bin and you'll have to buy some new track. So the track's firmly down, it's glued down with super glue of all things, but obviously some people may use track pins or PVA glue or something of that sort, but just make sure it is pinned down and flat. And there's a good tip here to find out whether your track is flat. Your fingers are an amazing sensory organ, and if you just run a wagon, you can feel if there's any undulations in the track. Your fingers, don't press down hard, just let it ride, and your fingers will pick up whether there's an undulation in the track. So that's quite a useful hint there, and I'm happy with that. The other thing is, if you're going to weather your track, obviously it's easier before you ballast, because otherwise you'll be ballasting, weathering the ballast as well, which may not be quite what you want. But I tend to spray the sleepers and the track before I do the ballasting. Ballasting is something which, if it goes wrong, as I said, can cause you major issues. But one of the things which can go wrong is points. And quite often people seek advice on forums. They've got their point, it's glued down, they ballast, and they find that it's glued up and can't move it. And normally that's because that little tie bar just there tends to get glued with whatever you've used to glue the ballast. Now, one of the things I've done over the years is to actually use petroleum jelly, and all I do is just use a cocktail stick and just dip it in the petroleum jelly and then just coat that tie bar and around the edges so that you get a good coating of petroleum jelly on there. And that won't do anything to the tie bar, but it will prevent any glue sticking. So once you've laid your track, before you lay your track, make sure you start that again. Before you put your point down, make sure you Vaseline it, and then once you've ballast, whilst the glue is drying, just make sure you keep operating the point at odd intervals during the drying time, and that will make sure that you've got the movement necessary to allow the point to operate, and the Vaseline will stop the glue sticking to the actual tie bar, so the point should not glue up. I've not had one glue up yet, so hopefully it does work, and it might be something that you'd like to try and save yourself the expense and grief of having to deal with glued up points. So we're in a position where we've got the track down firmly. It's weathered if you want it. If you're ballasting around a point, the Vaseline is there. So what's the next thing? Well, the choice of ballast is something which there's a lot of ballasts out there. Woodland Scenics make some, Jarvis makes some. It can be real granite chippings, or it can be some other scenic item. What I tend to use actually is kiln dried sand for this particular layout, and I've just decanted some into an old jam jar, and it's just the right size for 4mm scale ballast on this type of track work. For something on standard gauge, I'd probably use something like a Woodland Scenics ballast, which does look a little bit more sort of robust than what you'd find on a major line. So that's going to be our ballast of choice today. The other thing is, if you are doing the standard gauge track, you may well find that you've put your track down and you want that super clean line between the ballast and the rest of the scenery, and you can try and do it freehand or draw a line down the side of the track to paint your glue within, or put your ballast within. But what I tend to do in that situation is, and we've just got a demonstration piece here, let's make sure it is seen on camera, and I've put a couple of pieces of masking tape, and this is just a small scrap of track which I've glued down to a demonstration piece, and I just paint neat PVA on there. I'm not too worried as long as I'm not touching the track. If it goes over the masking tape, that's fine. So that's that. You can best off if you leave the PVA to sort of settle out and level itself up, which it will do, but for the sake of speed, and you don't want to be watching PVA glue levelling up, you just peel the masking tape back. You've got a super fine line there. And then what I tend to do, this is where this all gets a little bit difficult, I'll just use this sand as a ballast, but I just apply a little bit of sand like that. And I would just leave that to dry before doing anything else. And the advantage of that is that because you've got these two in effect shoulders of ready stuck ballast, when you do the rest of the ballasting, that almost acts as a sort of barrier to the ballast which you're putting down going over the lines, and especially when you glue it, it comes up to a sort of solid barrier of already glued ballast. So in effect you're able to maintain that nice straight line. And I'll just shake this off, and I think you can, if I can get that right, you can see there. Well, that's what I would do with mainline track. However, let's get back to what we're doing on Chalkdon, which is just ballasting this particular section of track here. And that's the other thing, ballasting, some people love it, some people hate it. It can be a tedious task, and you can get bored, and when you get bored you start making mistakes. So I tend to do small sections at a time. So this little section here is no more than about a foot long, and that suits me fine. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to find my spoon, which I've liberated from Mrs. Woody's kitchen, which I'll need to return before she notices it's gone. All I do is just decant a bit and spread it around just like that. Don't worry about it going over the top of the sleepers. That looks a bit of a mess at the moment, but then get yourself a soft paintbrush, and it is best soft, and then just start to brush it into place, and it's just very, very gentle action. Nothing too rigorous. If you use a hard bristle brush, you'll probably end up with the ballast flying all over the place. So this is nice and soft and gentle. That's sort of got it into the rough place. Now, if you want to then make sure that it's off the sleepers and things, just get your spoon and just tap it. And that will vibrate it, and that's going quite nicely there. You can see it's vibrated itself off the top of the sleepers, and that's all you have to do, and that makes quite a neat looking ballast there. Rather than have you watch me do the rest of this, I'll cut this video here and then come back once the rest of the ballast is down. Okay, we're back again. I've put the ballast in, I've adjusted it as I want it. So the next stage is to actually glue it down. And the way I do that is, firstly, I'm going to what's termed as pre-wet it, which is to try and break down the surface tension, so that when I actually put the what will be watered down PVA glue, it should go right the way through the sand and in effect glue it all rather than just be a crust on top. So what I tend to use these days is this IPA isopropyl alcohol, which does the job, and I apply that with a syringe. Now this one comes from an old inkjet refill kit. Shows you how much stuff I keep, much to my wife's amusement. But if you've got pets and they've been to the vet for some medication or something of that nature, generally you'll end up with a syringe to squirt it into their mouths. So again, those are the types of things, if you wash them out, just keep hold of them, they're useful. No doubt you can buy these things on Amazon or other sites on the internet, probably get a lifetime supply for a £5, but why pay for things when you can make do with what other people give you for other purposes? So we've got some IPA in there, and all I'm going to do is just gently just a drop, and you can see that's filtering its way out a little bit down the side. And again, rather than you watch me for 10 minutes doing this, I'll break away from the video and come back when we've done it all. Okay, so that's pre-wetted, as it were. One thing I should have said, when you use the syringe, don't be tempted to squirt it out at a massive rate. Be gentle, drop by drop. If you try and squirt it out, you're more than likely disturb the sand or your ballast, and you'll end up with sort of pock marks in it, and all that work you've done to get it in the right place before will have been wasted. So gentle sort of drops, that's the way to go. Now we're ready for the glue. Again, using a favoured jam jar, I've filled this with a bit of water and a few drops of washing up liquid, what I'm going to do is mix in PVA, and it's just quite ordinary children's washable PVA glue, Craft Planet. I think I got this from the range for about £1.50 or something, so let's just pour in that, and we want roughly about 50%. So that's gone in there, and you're probably thinking, well, that's a lot for that little bit of ballasting, you'll not need all that. Well, I won't, but I will be doing some more ballasting later, so that will keep in the jar, and it will probably keep for several weeks if not months. All I'm going to do now is, with the convenience of the jar, you'll see the PVA sunk to the bottom, so all I'm going to do now is just use the facility of the jar, with the top on obviously, just to shake it up and mix it. It's a bit like one of those James Bond moments, isn't it? As a martini shaken but not stirred. Don't think Mrs. Woody thinks I'm a James Bond though. Right, and that's mixed it up. So going back to the syringe, what I'm going to do is dip the syringe in there. Let's try and get you in the right view. This is a bit. So I've got a syringe full of the concoction. I'll just put that safely away, and I'll put the lid on the jar. And now, my luck, I'll spill it. And then, much the way we applied the IPA, quite literally all I'm doing is dropping the glue down, and you can see, because the IPA has already pre-wetted the ballast, the glue is sinking down quite quickly into it. It will look a bit of a mess for a time, don't worry about that. It will come right at the end of the day. And again, just gently drop by drop. Don't be tempted to squirt it all out in one go. And again, rather than have you watch this, if you're still watching, I'll break away from the video and come back once that's finished. So that's all the glue applied. Don't forget to wash out your syringe, otherwise next time you come to use it, it will be glued up. So just dip it in some water, pull it out and push it back in again a few times, just to cycle a bit of water through it, and that will be great. We could just leave this to dry naturally, and once it's all dry, you'll just need to clean the track, because obviously there's a fair few contaminants been wandering over it, so that will need doing. And you'll also probably need to just run a small screwdriver or something along the inside side of the rails, just to make sure that there's no ballast which is going to affect the wheels of trains going over. A great personal sort of safety issue to myself, I've borrowed my wife's hairdryer, which isn't going to go down well if she finds out about this, but I'm going to give this a little bit of a boost to dry, because it's not the warmest of days yet, so I'm just going to give this a little bit of encouragement to dry. Obviously you don't want to see me drying ballast, so we'll come back again in a moment. So we've had the hairdryer on it for about 5 minutes, and you can see that it's already beginning to dry, which is nice. I'm not going to go too far with it, because obviously hairdryers do put out a fair amount of heat, and I don't want to do any damage or set anything on fire. So just a few minutes, it's enough to just build up a bit of heat in the ballast itself, so that the glue will go off fairly quickly. Once the glue has gone off, it's a case then of cleaning the track, and as I said, just making sure there's no ballast on the inside of the rail. what I would tend to do is just run a small handheld hoover over just to pick up any loose stuff. You may find that there are odd parts where the ballast hasn't glued down for some reason, or there's just a gap which you've missed. Don't worry about it. Just in effect treat that little piece as a small ballasting job, and just do everything again with the application of the ballast in that particular spot, a little bit of IPA and some glue, and it should be fine. I think the thing to remember about ballast is that it's not perfect. I work on at a railway museum, and I've done a fair amount of ballast work myself, and I can tell you it's not perfect. These photographs you see back in the 1930s when they had the prize length or track gang, that's probably the last time that you ever saw really perfect ballast. But there were several guys there who would just literally spend day after day going up and down the track, their length of track, putting the ballast into the right places. So I hope you've learned something of interest and use in this video. If you stayed tuned this far, thanks very much for watching. Thank you to the people who've subscribed to the channel as well. That's really nice. I never expected that. And as I say, I hope these videos are of use. So this is another Woody Wow. There will be others. Not quite sure what on yet, but there will be others. So I hope you've, as I say, enjoyed this. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again. Bye.